Unit 5% ratio and rate. Before we get started on this unit, there's a few things you gotta remember back from grade 7. The first thing is how to convert a fraction to a decimal and then a percent. The easiest way to convert a fraction to a decimal, you could take your calculator if you are allowed and go 3 divided by 50. So if I went and used a calculator, and I'll take this one right here, and went 3 divided by 50, my answer will be 0.06. Now, if you're not allowed to use a calculator when you're converting it, what you want to try to do is to get the bottom number to be out of 100 or 10 or 1,000, because remember, every single decimal, so here's my decimal, every single decimal can be written as a fraction. If I put a 1 there, this decimal can be written as 1/10, because this is the tenths place. If I have 2 places after the decimal, so if I go 1, 0, now I'm in the hundredths place, so it's going to be 10 out of 100. And of course, if I have one more place, it will be out of thousandths, so it'll be 100 out of 1,000. So you can do that if you can convert each one of these to something out of 100. If you can't do that and you are allowed to use a calculator, some numbers work better than others, then you're just going to have to go 3 divided by 50 or 7 divided by 25 and so on. So let's change this. I can make this become 100 pretty easy by timesing it by 2, and I'd better do that to the top as well. Now I have 6 out of 100. There, I have my fraction out of 100. So now I can write that as a decimal. So 0.06. That'll make that be 6 in the hundredths place. Now to change that to a percent, remember percent simply means out of 100. So any decimal you have, you can go back to something out of 100. So now I have percent, which means out of 100, and I have 6 there. So I just changed it to 6%. Now with 7 out of 25, I know that if I multiply the bottom by 4 and the top by 4, I will have something out of 100. So now I have 4 times 25 is 100. 4 times 7 is 28 out of 100. Written as a decimal, 0.28. So I got 28 hundredths. Change that to a percent. Well, because out of 100 is percent, we have 28%. This last one here doesn't work out so easy because I can't multiply this by anything to make it become 10 or 100 or 1,000 or anything else. So I'm going to have to use the calculator on this one. 8 divided by 9 equals 0.888888, and it looks like it's repeating. So I've got 0.888 and so on. But I'm going to round it off to 2 decimal places because I'm going to want to change it to percent. So for in this case, I'm going to round it off to 89, which will give me 89%. How do I know that's 89%? Because this is 89 hundredths, or as a fraction, I could go 89 out of 100, something like that. So you need to know how to change fairly common fractions into decimals, and then from the decimals you can change it into a percent fairly easy. So remember how to write a percent as a decimal and a fraction. So 36% really just means 36 out of 100. 44% is 44 out of 100. Write this as a decimal. Well, it's going to be 0 whole and 36 hundredths. This one down here will be 0 and 44 hundredths. Down here, we have 5 hundredths, which of course is 0.05. Be careful not to put the 5 right here in the tenths place. We need 5 in the hundredths place, which is right here. Now that you understand how to put these things into decimals and into fractions and how to go back and forth between them, here's another hundredths grid. So if we're talking about percent, and I want to say 1%, this is hundredths, and remember percent is out of 100. So if I want to say 1%, I would shade in one of these. If I want to say 2%, I will shade in two of these. If I want to say 100%, I will shade in all of this. If I want to shade in, let me see, 2 and then half of another, it will be 2.5%, or as a decimal, 2.5%. If I wanted to shade in all of this again, and then maybe 1/4 of this, or 1/4 of the black, it would be 2 decimal. Now what's 1/4 as a decimal, or 1 divided by 4? It would be 25. So this is 1/4. Okay, in section 5.1, we're going to look at fractions, decimals, and percents, and we're going to change some of these common ones, and then we're going to look at a few that are a little harder to change, and then shade them in on the hundreds grid. So let's start off with this one, 11/20. Now on your calculator, if you're doing that, we would simply go 11 divided by 20, and you would end up with a lovely decimal. Okay. Now, we can change this without doing that. I can make this bottom become 100, because if it's out of 100, I can really put it in a fraction and a decimal and a percent real easy. So I'll times this by 5, because 5 times 20 is 100. So I'd better do the same thing with the top. 5 times 11 is 55. So 55 hundredths. So I will change that to 0.55, which is 55%. Another example, if I have 5/8, this one's going to be a little bit harder to change to something out of 100. I could simply take my calculator if I'm allowed and go 5 divided by 8, and here's what I'll get, 0.625. The other way to do this is to see if I can multiply the bottom number to make it 10. And of course, I can't multiply 8 by anything to make it 10. I could multiply it by 125, and that would give me 1,000 on the bottom. So let's do that. That will give me 5 times 125 will give me 625 thousandths. Now you can write anything out of 1,000 as a decimal. It's simply 0 decimal, and we're going to need 3 decimal places because this is my thousandth place. So I'm going to put 625 in the thousandths place. So now that I have this done, I could simply write it as a percent. Remember, percent, when you're changing a decimal to percent, one way to do it is simply shift the decimal 2 places to the right. So if it's 0.625, it's going to be 62.5%, so 62.5%. The other way to look at it is that it's 62.5, or 625 out of 1,000. Well, if the decimal is here, and the decimal is here, how do I make this become out of 100? Well, I simply divide it by 10, which is the same as shifting the decimal place 1 place. So I'd better divide the top by the same amount. So now I'm shifting it 1 place, and I have 62.5 out of 100, or 62.5%. Now, how do I shade that on the hundreds grid? Well, I'm going to shade in all of this first row. That's 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. Okay, so that's 60%. And then I'm going to need two more, 61, 62, and a half percent. So this is a half. So all this here should be shaded in to show 62.5%. So that's all there is to changing it to a fraction and then writing it as a percent. Here's another example. If you look at the hundredths grid, you can break up every one of these into something smaller out of 100. So that's only 1/100th of a percent. So 1/4 of a percent would be 0.25%. Okay. Don't forget, when you're changing the percent back into a decimal, you are going to have to shift it to the left two places, okay, in order to change it. So if this is 1%, this is 2%, this is 3%, you could always have 3 and some form of 100th percent. So let's show this on a 100 chart. Let's show 12% on a 100 chart. So I'll shade in 12. So the whole first row, that'll give me 10, 11, 12%. Is 12 out of 100, or 12 shaded in out of 100. Let's change this percent as a fraction and then a decimal. So here's what we have. We have 48.5%. So I'm going to write 48.5 out of 100. As you know, decimals don't go good in a fraction, so we want to get rid of this decimal by timesing it by 10, which shifts it one place to the right. So there is a decimal in every number, so we're going to shift this one place to the right, or times it by 10. That does the same thing. So now our new fraction is 485 out of 1,000. So now we have it written out of 1,000. Okay, now that we have it written as a fraction, it's real easy to change any fraction that is out of 1,000 to a decimal. Because remember, if we go back to what a decimal is, this first place is the tenths place. 2 places will be the hundredths place. 3 places is the thousandths place. So now I can write 0 decimal, and I'm going to need 3 places because it's 2 to the thousandths. 4, 8, 5, and there's my answer, changing it to a fraction and then to a decimal. Now, of course, you can reduce this fraction or simplify it by dividing the top and the bottom by the same, but you do that if you're asked to do it. So here's another one, 10.75. So let's follow the same steps and change that to a fraction and then to a decimal. So we've got 10.75%. So we got 10.75, and remember, percent is out of 100. So we don't like this decimal here up in the top, so we can shift it 2 places, or that's basically timesing it by 100. Down here, you have to shift this decimal 2 places, or the same thing as timesing by 100. So here's what you'll have on the top. You'll have 1075. Why did we shift it 2 places? Well, because that'll get rid of your decimal. So down below, we will end up with 100 times 100, or in other words, 1 with 1, 2, 3, 4 zeros. So 1, 2, 3, 4 zeros. And of course, if you remember your decimal places, this is tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 10 thousandths, which is what we need. We need 1, 2, 3, 4 decimal places, because this is the 10,000th place. So I'll put 1075 in the thousandths place. Okay? So that will give us 10.75% if you were to change it back. Looking at this one, write this 100 chart as a fraction and a percent. As a fraction out of 100, count them up. 10, 20, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So I've got 39, and it looks like about a half. 0.5. Change that, of course, to shift that decimal one place, shift it one place, and it'll add a 0. So we've got 395 and 1,000. So I'll write it with 3 places because it's thousandths. So now I have 395 thousandths. That will give us 39.5%. Another one. We're going to write this again as a fraction and a percent. 1, 2, 3. It almost looks the same, except this time it's not a half of a block. It's 39 and a quarter. So it's 39 decimal. Now, if you don't know what 1/4 is as a decimal, you should know that. It is decimal 25. That's a very common benchmark. So I'm going to go 39.25. The only thing I got left to do is times it by 100 or shift the decimal place 2 places. That'll give us 39.25. And of course we shift the decimal that's at the end of this number 2 places, so 1, 2, but we got to put zeros there to jump, or it's the same as timesing by 100. That'll give us 1,000,000 or 10 thousandths. Keeping in mind how many decimal places we need now. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Put your numbers in. 3, 9, 2, 5. So that'll give us 39.25% if we were to change it back to a fraction, or to a percent. How do we convert a fraction and a decimal? So let's change this here, percent, to a fraction. Well, if it's 0.75%, that means it's 0.75 out of 100. Okay? The only difference is we're not dealing with whole percents. We're dealing with part percents. So if it's 0.75 out of 100, we don't like decimals in a fraction, so how do we get rid of it? We're going to change this there, there. So we're going to change it twice, and then we're going to shift this twice, once, twice, or in other words, we're timesing it by 100. And the answer is 75 over 1 0, and then another 0, and 2 more. So we got 75 10,000ths. As a decimal, we're going to end up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 places. 1, 2, 3, 4. Sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4 places, because that'll give us our 10,000th place. And we got to put 75 in at the end of it, because we want 75 in the 10,000ths place. And put zeros, of course, in front of it. Changing 0.4%. So let's put 0.4 out of 100, because that's what percent means, out of 100. We want to move that decimal over one place, so we want to move it over one place to get rid of it. and we end up with 4 out of 1,000. Of course, we can write that as a decimal because we'll need 1, 2, 3 decimal places. 1, 2, 3, and we'll put the 4 in the 1,000th place and put zeros in front. So 0.4% will equal, as a decimal, it'll equal decimal 004. Can you change this one to a decimal and a percent? Well, the first thing to do is to change it to either something out of 10, something out of 100, or something out of 1,000. But in this case, it's not going to be easy. I'm going to calculator this one. So I'm going to go 13 divided by 300, and the answer is 0.04333. Looks like it's repeating. 0, I better check it again. 4, and then 3, repeating. Repeating. All right, now we've just converted this to a decimal. Now we need to change it to a percent. Okay? To change any decimal to a percent, excuse me, you have to shift it or divide it by 100. So this place right here is the hundredths place, right here. So if we keep this and we'll say it's 4, 3, 3, and I'm not going to go any further with the decimal. I'm just going to use 3 right up to there. And that's out of, this is tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 10,000ths. So I'm going to put 10,000ths. Of course, for percent, I only want it out of 100. So I'll just simply shift 1, 2 places to get it out of 100. Or I'll shift 2 places to get it out of 100. So to get it out of 100, it's 4.33 out of 100. Or 4.3%. Again, another way that it might be even simpler to do it is just simply, when you have a decimal, to change it to a percent, just simply divide it, simply times it by 100. So if you times it by 100, you simply shift the decimal 2 places, and you have 4.3 repeating percent in this case. And so to change it to a decimal to a percent, you can just times it by 100 or shift the decimal place 2 places to the right. And you do opposite to change your percent to a decimal.